Welcome to the special edition of the North Andover Zoning and Board of Appeals for February 25th, 2026. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So we're going to start off with approval of the meeting minutes from January 20th, 2026. Any discussion before we put that to a vote? All right, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second? Yeah, you can't second. Melissa or Alexandria, do you want a second?
I second the motion. Go ahead, Alexandria.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. And
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Where we've got folks partially on remote and partially in the room.
Yeah.
They might want to just identify who the board members are
Thank
for
you.
folks.
Yes, so I am Michael Liss, I'm the chair. We have Frank Killalay here. We have James Testa. We have online, we have Alexandria Jacobs, and we have Melissa Rutherford. And I believe that we expect Laura Craig Coleman to join us momentarily. All right, with that, I would like to continue. And so what we're going to do today is a similar path to what we did last month. We're going to discuss, but this time we're going to discuss the civil and stormwater peer reviews and the applicant's response to them. And as before, the path that I think we're going to go through, as long as everybody's okay with it, is we'll have the applicant present first. They have a slide deck that's prepared, and then we'll bring on our peer reviewer and we'll ask them some questions. And then we'll open up to public comment and get feedback from the community, and then we will engage again with the applicant, get their responses, and if necessary, also bring on our peer reviewer again. We are joined by, for our peer reviewer, by Janet Bernardo from Horsley Witten Group, and we thank you very much for helping us out here. And as legal assistants, we have Carolyn Murray from KP Law.
Is this
And we have
just drainage, or is it all site civil?
is all site civil.
Okay.
And we have Terry McNeil as our administrator.
Sidewalks, parking areas, all that kind of stuff, okay.
Yep. Yep. All right. Would you folks like to come forward, identify yourselves?
Good evening, I'm David Steinberg, principal at RCG LLC. We represent the applicant, East Mill Housing LLC.
Phil Henry with Civil Design Group, civil engineer.
All right. Thank you.
So to kick things off, as you mentioned, tonight is dedicated to the civil and stormwater design. The slide deck we'll walk through pretty quickly. It's a pretty technical aspect of the job, and so we'll take you through sort of the big picture items that were raised by the peer review. Phil can talk a little bit about how they approach the civil design, any questions, and the standards he's applying. So I'll just take through some of the bigger picture stuff. It sounds like we want to get through everything one time through on the slide deck rather than splitting that up.
I think that would be best.
Okay.
If we find that we need to divide it up later, we can follow up that way.
Great. Okay. So Terry, you're controlling? All right. So that's how we sort of split it up. The one thing I did add to the agenda, since I think it was of special interest, even though it's not technically necessarily relevant to the job, is the discussion of the previous flooding that had happened on the properties. So I can go into a little bit of that myself at the end.
Okay.
All right, are we all set online?
They're all set
Okay.
online, it's just that screen may not be the most helpful. Yeah, so I apologize to the audience for turning my head to you, but that's what I need to do to see the screen.
All right, so if we go to the next slide, Terry, please. Thank you. So on the peer review comments, and obviously the peer review had to go through a lot of sets of plans, it seemed like the major areas where we had to make some adjustments and clarifications were in 3 areas. The parking garage plans, which just weren't previously provided in detail to be able to see what each level of the deck looked like, where the handicap spaces, what were the dimensions of the parking spaces, how many were on each level, those types of questions. So we supplemented the prior submittal with the architectural plans of each level of the parking deck. So that was one area of further clarification of our plans to make sure there were compliant parking spaces. The second area was the site grading and retaining walls and additional details that were asked for by the peer reviewer. So Phil provided some follow-up on that. And in one general area of the plan, we decided to move ahead and remove the pedestrian path to Prescott Street that came from the garage and headed sort of northwest toward Prescott Street. Some of the neighbors had raised an objection to that in meetings outside of this. And we didn't want to start adjusting grading and retaining wall details until we resolve whether we were going to eliminate that. So we were able to eliminate that and maintain our code compliance for the egress from the parking garage, and then cleaned up some of the retaining walls and provided more details on that. And then the third area were some of the questions about dimensional waivers, which get a little bit technical, but about, we are in the sub-district A overlay, and we're using that as our baseline for zoning waivers, but because of the other underlying zones, we're providing additional information about waivers that would be required for those other zones. And then there are a couple areas of questions where our attorney, John Smolak, who's here as well from Smolak and Vaughn, was clarifying with the building commissioner what his interpretation of some of those, for instance, setbacks were based on if the overlay was silent on it or not. I think is the simplest way to explain it. So some of those dimensional waivers were clarified, and what the assumptions were about the setbacks. All right, if we go to the next slide, this is just a clarification. This was the landscape plan after removal of the pedestrian path to Prescott Street. There are some adjustments in things like plantings, some of the grading and retaining walls. Nothing, I think, that material impacted the stormwater design, but there are some adjustments in the grading that were necessary or that were related to that. You can go to the next slide, Terry. On the stormwater design, again, we're trying to drill down to the main points of question from the plans that were submitted. The current garage, and you can see that from sort of the satellite view, it's basically just a giant concrete rectangle of 2 acres of land, and a lot coverage ratio of about 33%. All of that garage now takes the rainfall onto the surface. That is considered not clean runoff because it can be contaminated by the residue of vehicles. That goes in 2 roof drains that then bring it down through oil water separation systems and dump into the existing swale. So there's a landscape swale that runs between 2 different parking aisles on the site. The existing swale ties into public infrastructure on High Street. So once the water runs off from the garage into the swale, it gets carried west toward High Street and then goes into pipes in High Street that then connect into the private culverts that go through the mills. So that's the existing conditions, and I think if you flip to the next slide there, Terry, that shows the sort of existing conditions there. So, and I don't know, Phil, if you want to use your laser pointer, but you can sort of see just south of the garage, there's the double-loaded drive aisle, and then there, right, exactly, you can see a channel, a green space and a channel there. So all that rain that's being captured by the garage now is being funneled into that.
Yes, so we actually did investigative research. We started popping downspouts for that garage, and we found that it eventually collects at the midpoint of the garage and goes through a separator right where my laser is, and then it dumps out into this swale here. This swale then conveys runoff via overland flow to a pipe that then picks that up and joins into a manhole. And then from there, it makes its way onto High Street and then crosses the existing driveway, then crosses High Street, and then meanders down, and then right in front of 4 High, there's the culvert that takes the mill pond through the building, through the East Mill building. But if this locus if you were to see this, it would continue in a westerly fashion, go to eventually make its way down to Sutton Pond, under Sutton Street, and then into the Merrimack. So globally, that's the watershed where this site eventually ends up.
So, stop me if you're going to discuss this when you get to the 2023 flood, but when that happened, will we discuss what happened to that pathway?
Well, that pathway got bisected. It got interrupted because the mill pond overtopped.
Yeah.
And water literally traveled through the building. So
Okay.
windows had to be broke so that to allow water to flow through the front of the building
Got it.
into the street. So, I mean, that was obviously a very unique situation.
I understand, but it's very fresh in the minds of everybody
Yeah,
here.
yeah, I
And so
think-
we're going to talk a lot about it today.
Yeah, I think that's why I sort of saved it for the last slide. We can talk more globally because it's not, I think we understand what was happening at the garage, but you have to look at the whole neighborhood.
Right, but
There's a lot
you
of
know,
factors there that are contributing.
Absolutely, and I just want to understand the role of this
Yep.
property in how that played out.
Yep.
Right.
All right, so then in the proposed conditions, so if you go to the next slide, Terry, what we're talking about here in our new design is to make the conditions better than they are now, in general. So Phil can refer to the specifics of the standards he was applying, but he's using the state standards, and there are waivers you'll see in the way we've set up our waivers that bypass the local bylaw. We're asking for waivers from the local bylaw to apply the current state standards, so we've got one baseline that we're using here. In a practical sense, the amount of coverage we have on the site now is or that we would have in the proposed condition is very similar to what we have in the existing condition. There's a 1% increase in lot coverage of impervious area, and there is another benefit of reducing the footprint of the garage area in the new condition, which is that most of that coverage area is now roofs that redirect what's clean water down, which is being captured and moved through, and only 0.6 acres versus 2 acres would be garage runoff that would have to be treated and is rerouted in this condition. So because of the opportunity here to take down that massive structure and redirect water around the site, it starts to channel water into different areas and mitigate the flows before they're getting into the existing public infrastructure. And so I think rather than pointing out specifically each change, there were some peer review comments that Phil incorporated into our design and resubmitted in our response there. So if you go to the next slide, please, Terry. So this is, the grading plan and some of the stormwater stuff. Obviously, a lot of information on this plan. But as a reference, you can see, rather than one giant rectangular garage, you've got a smaller rectangular garage in the middle, and then buildings that sort of spread out and allow us to collect water in different places and redistribute them around the site. And Phil has resized some structures that are collecting the water and then putting them into new pipes, and then these pipes allow the water to be redistributed and flow into public infrastructure in a less impactful way than just the sort of mass collection was before into the swale.
Is there a roof over the top floor of the garage?
Well, it's just a parking surface.
So it's open deck?
Yeah, open parking surface on the top floor of the garage. All right, and so then if you want to jump to the next one, Terry. So in the 2023 flooding, I've tried to sort of summarize as best I can. I was there, I was watching it. I know these sites pretty well from managing both the East Mill and West Mill for a long period of time, and frankly, we've invested millions of dollars over the past 20 years on this site to help deal with the stormwater and the existing water flows that are through the site. But some of the baseline information, I think it's important to know if people haven't been following it. There's been, the town and state sponsored a study of the watershed subsequent to that flooding. So this information is coming from that report that their consultants presented. And of course, the big overarching factor is how much rain fell, how fast, and that none of the infrastructure, whether it was ours or the town's, could handle that much water and get it downstream fast enough. So in the case of this particular site, what actually happened was, in addition to what we were collecting on the top of the garage and was being funneled into our swale, is water was just sheet flowing down from the neighborhoods. There wasn't enough infrastructure to contain the water that was coming downhill toward us. And so this site in particular is an interesting sort of transitory site because everything from this site flows downstream toward the mills. And so the collection point that was the bottleneck here is downstream from this site. It obviously doesn't flood back up into the neighborhoods, whatever the impact is here. The properties that are most impacted from whatever we're doing here on stormwater management are the mill properties that are downstream. Those top 2 points just sort of give some context to that. A 100-year storm for 24 hours would have been 8 inches in total. So 2 inches over 6 hours, we got about 6 inches in 6 hours. It also happened to be other factors around the mills that aggravated the situation, which were that it was a very wet summer. We had a high water table. Ponds were high. There was not a lot of capacity to absorb a big rainstorm anyway. And in particular, there was a few failures of infrastructure around the property. There was a collapsed pipe in Prescott Street that was a town pipe. That meant water was just rivers coming from every direction down into the mill areas. So it was, I don't think there was any especially exaggerated impact of this garage on that flooding. It was more what was coming down from the neighborhoods, but in any event, we want to try to mitigate as best we can in future work. This is an opportunity to take away that garage and improve the stormwater management conditions. There were other factors around. Osgood Pond was at a high level. The Sutton Pond condominiums had been under enforcement order. We're still working on the bridge there and what its capacity was. And as Phil mentioned, we had the mill building's layout historically really trapped water once East Mill Pond, which is collecting the full watershed, and you can see on the next slide, Lake Kachikowik flows downstream to this little property, right? So if the lake or Stevens Pond or the brook between Stevens Pond and our East Mill Pond are overwhelmed, that East Mill Pond will eventually overtop. Even though we have upgraded the infrastructure of that to be able to handle 100-year storms. In this case, that's what happened. Actually, it was several hours after the street flooded, the pond overtopped because of the impact from the rest of the town. In that case, the buildings trapped the water. Instead of letting it go downstream, we have removed some of those blockages by removing structures through our site, through the East Mill site, to make sure there's less damage to the buildings and less aggravation of the situation in the case of a future flooding event. So apart from those investments to open up the site itself, the proposed project helps mitigate some of those stormwater flows that are coming from this part of the site into that bottleneck at the mills.
So, in the comments from the peer reviewer, I think it's item J. It's section 1, item J. It says that in accordance with 250-23E22, Horsley Witten recommends that the applicant provide pipe size and calculations using Manning's equation and confirms that the drainage pipes can accommodate a 25-year storm event. And your response here is that the connection points on High Street are 12-inch, and so making a pipe wider just means that you're going to create a bottleneck at that point, is from what I understand. So, and then you mentioned that the applicant intends to continue the conversation with DPW to figure out a way to handle that. So what does that conversation look like, and what do we expect to have as an answer before we're making a vote?
Well, I think that, and Phil can answer some of the technical questions. I think what we want to do is separate a little bit about what the public infrastructure capacity improvements could be, which there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things we can talk about, some of them today, and what the impact of this particular project on this particular piece of land is to that. Because I don't think this project is going to solve the flooding problems of the neighborhood, in and of itself. So, this project itself will have an improved condition in the future condition than it has in the current condition. That's sort of our focus. There are assets that the town could use to redirect water away from these bottlenecks, and there are ways to upgrade the public infrastructure around the site to be able to handle more. But since we don't control all that, we're mostly working on designing a system around our site that funnels into the existing public infrastructure as best it can without causing flooding.
Yeah.
So, sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So, in the event that the town were to take some of those measures that you're talking about to improve water flow, would the bottleneck then be your infrastructure if it's not expanded? Does that account for potential improvements in the future?
And just for the public record, because we hadn't previously introduced her, that is our Vice Chair, Laura Craig Coleman. Sorry, go on.
I apologize for technical difficulties at the beginning.
Yeah, I would say, to answer that question, in this case, there's sort of two different owners. There's the applicant, East Mill Housing LLC, which is breaking up its infrastructure to redistribute the water and mitigate some of its impact. The bottleneck at the culverts that cross through the mills have two different owners from the applicant in this case. So that has, the only way to impact that bottleneck is to reroute some of the watershed around that location. So for instance, when Avalon Bay did their project, they installed, I think it was an 18-inch pipe through their site that redirects downstream into Osgood or Sutton Pond, or 36. That was created for public infrastructure. That public infrastructure could tie into and pull away from that bottleneck. That's not controlled by us. That's a public infrastructure asset. It's not being utilized at this point. All that water is still coming down into our site. There's also other water, other ways to pull water away from the perimeter of the site and get it around the site that is off locus, right? Yeah. So we're doing what we can with the water that comes onto this site. We are not redesigning other people's sites, whether it's the mill buildings downstream or the public infrastructure upstream from us.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate the notion that there's probably no circumstance under which 7 inches in 6 hours will be handled by a drainage system. That is, completely at least. But I do think a 25-year storm event is not an unreasonable standard, right? And I guess my worry here is that I appreciate that the infrastructure is challenging and that there are areas around it, but what you are telling me is that when a 25-year event happens, there will be flooding, and it'll be pretty significant because the drainage system right now cannot handle it.
I don't know if that's an accurate statement.
No, not necessarily. So there's two things, and we should let Janet speak too. There's hydrology, and then there's the hydraulics. So pipe capacity deals with hydraulics, the way water travels through the pipe. So I think that's where this is going. Hydrology is the 24-hour storm,
Okay.
mitigation for the 2, 10, 25, and 100-year storm. And we do that on paper. We also mitigate volume. So micro-analyzing this site, I'll defer to Janet's feedback, but I think we comply from a local and state standard. I think the greater conversation is, how do we get water to pass through the site? Because I'll call it the Prescott neighborhood, which is bordered by this site. You go to the Chinese restaurant, down to the fireplace, fire department, and then back down, bordering High Street, fire department, Prescott. All that flows down to Avalon West Mill. And I think a combination of poorly positioned catch basins along Prescott Street helped with the flooding that bypasses that infrastructure. I think this is, to Dave's point, bypasses that Prescott infrastructure, which is intended to go through the 36-inch pipe. It actually makes its way to 4 High, which is the front door of the cafe, essentially, on High Street. So if you look at it, the cafe on High Street is the low point because Water Street's high, and then we have the Prescott neighborhood high. And then in the back, we have the pond that's literally going through the building. So that's the bottleneck. So I think what we'd like, and we also talked to DPW and engineering, and I don't want to speak for them, but I think they had discussed that they even know of some pipes that are discharging onto the subject property. Granted, they're not going to go through our pipe capacity, so we can bypass that. But there is a conversation to be had, perhaps, because the drainage infrastructure, the public drainage infrastructure in High Street is a 12-inch pipe. So we can do a pipe analysis and say, okay, 50% of the pipes are 12 inches, and then eventually we got to upgrade to an 18, and then we connect into High Street.
Yeah.
Or, I think what Dave is probably suggesting is, we'd like to have a conversation to see what that 36-inch pipe is actually doing and handling. And if there's an opportunity to divert a fraction of this. Because if you look at it globally, it's all going under Sutton Street.
Yeah.
And eventually to Merrimack, into the Merrimack. So, however, that would require, so when we analyze sites like this, we want to micro-analyze it in the sense that we want to mitigate our flow across our property lines, more or less. Yeah. So that's where the analysis points are. Something like this would require a more global approach, and I think that dovetails into what the flooding study, sort of that research, I don't know who commissioned that, I'm sure it was the town, but there might be an opportunity for a marriage of that too, is what we're suggesting.
Yeah, and I think I would like to see that. And I guess then so we don't have to have an answer right now. We'll be in touch about scheduling long term, but I think it would be good for us to have some kind of follow-up discussion before the end of all of this, covering some version of it.
Yeah, so I think tonight, perhaps, I'm not suggesting that we shelve that talk. We should continue to come back to it, but I think we should also focus on the site and the other aspects of the civil and stormwater review that are not tied to the hydraulics of the property and the surrounding area, because we'd like to see if we can come to a consensus on as much as we can, at least tonight.
Yeah.
And then hopefully in concert work towards the regional hydraulics of the area.
Okay. One other smaller one is item, I guess it's L, is that it says, in accordance with 250-23E, all drain pipes are to be reinforced concrete pipe with a minimum diameter of 12 inches. Horsley Witten notes the applicant is proposing a high-density HDPE pipes. I got to admit, I am not enough of an expert to understand the distinction between HDPE and concrete pipes and why we would want one or the other. So can you help me understand that?
I mean, I could try. I mean, okay. I didn't write the regulation, but my guess is, and we see this in a lot of communities where communities have adopted and have authored local stormwater regulations.
Yeah.
And what towns typically do is they take language from DEP, from the state.
Yeah.
But then they also take language from subdivision rules and regulations. So I think I would venture to guess that we would probably find in the subdivision rules and regulations, if we open that all pipes shall be reinforced concrete pipe. And of course, if we were doing a subdivision, we would have to conform to that, because then that gets turned over to the town, right? In terms of like the actual characteristics, they're both smooth walled, right?
Yeah.
They're not corrugated. Obviously, plastic would have a different, we'll call it Manning's N, and we're getting sort of technical, but perhaps water travels a little bit faster in plastic pipe versus concrete pipe. It's de minimis, but I think to answer your question, I would venture to guess that the concrete requirement probably came from pulling from subdivision rules and regulations.
Okay.
Because technically, if there were no subdivision, if there were no local stormwater bylaws, someone that's doing a private site plan wouldn't be necessarily subject to the subdivision rules and regulations. So that we've seen in other communities where they sort of pull from different.
So are
rules
there
and
no
regulations.
benefits to concrete versus plastic?
I mean, I can't speak to like the longevity of them. I think they both last pretty long. I think it's a preference at that point. I mean, obviously, concrete is it takes a machine to move that. You know, with 20-foot pipe, two women can install them via hand. So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think if we're talking about that, I think that's a victory. I think
That's
we
fine.
can talk about that.
I just have no, like I said, I have no idea. I'm
Yeah.
a polymer scientist by training, so I should know more about this, but it's not my field at all. And so but your contention is that substantively speaking, it's not a
Yeah,
big
I think globally on the waivers, I think you'll find that we meet all the state standards, that's our opinion, and by default, we substantially meet all the local, we meet all the local stormwater, but there are items that we have chosen to seek waivers on.
Yeah.
That we don't think really impact the overall design of the project.
Okay.
You speak.
I have a few more questions. I don't know if, are we,
James is about to start.
okay.
So you're looking for waivers, is it because the state is more lenient, or not quite sure what the difference between those
No, the
state
state
local?
standards are the state standards, and we have to meet those 10 standards. The local standards piggyback on the state standards, and as is the case almost 100% of the time, the local standards are not more stringent in some cases, although I think there's a volume mitigation that locally is a requirement, but from a state standard, there is no volume mitigation. State standards require peak flow mitigation, but there's additional local regulations like concrete pipe or pipe capacity analysis, where you wouldn't find that on the state side, so.
All right, Laura, you wanted to chime in?
Sure. I guess I was wondering, the way that the waiver was written, it wasn't just sort of specific aspects of the local bylaw, like concrete versus plastic, that were requested for waiver. It was sort of waiving the entire local bylaw, which, I'm happy to get technical if that's what would make the most sense to do instead of sort of glossing over things. I'm wondering what specifically about the local bylaw makes it impracticable for this exercise, because to my mind, the local bylaw would take into account the fact that North Andover has a long-standing issue with flooding well beyond the 2023 event, and that groundwater in general behaves differently here than in every other community in Massachusetts, and therefore local bylaw would have some merit in this conversation. So waiving the entire thing just seems like it might be missing some of the local intentions.
Well, if I can say one thing, I think there is a technical point here that Phil's waiving the local bylaw, and it doesn't mean it doesn't meet any of the standards of the local bylaw, right? There's a difference just in that he is designing to meet the state bylaws. Some of those may or may not meet local, but in general, it's not like none of the local bylaw is satisfied here. I think he's pointing out that there's some specifications that would be, unnecessary as far as mitigation from his assessment, or from our assessment, and not necessarily onerous as far as, right, dealing with a lot of concrete pipe through a large site that'll be privately owned. So is that a fair assessment? Because I think it looks worse, he says every single time I'm waiving the local bylaw, that's because he's sticking to one standard and trying to be consistent about what he's meeting.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a highly regulated space, like in the engineering world, so I didn't, our position is that we are seeking a waiver, a blanket waiver per se, and I think Janet does a good job of outlining the pertinent local regulations where she called out, and we've provided responses to that. So, perhaps, we'd welcome a conversation with that, about that. But I guess I'd say that the stormwater meets certainly the state regulations, and sort of by default meets most of the local bylaws, or the local stormwater bylaw provisions that's incorporated. And there are some that we are seeking waivers. That's part of the process, I guess. And we'd welcome conversation about which ones are just a no-go per se. So we'd like to have that discussion.
I guess maybe my question was to ask to have that discussion then. I guess I count at least 9 times in the peer review submission where the peer reviewer that I think we've used on a lot of projects asked for more information based on our local bylaw, and essentially the answer every time was, well, we're asking to waive that. And then there was some additional information about a few things, but like the plastic versus concrete, which I don't even think is maybe the most important one. But there's one that's about calling out any significant or unique trees or tree clusters, and that was essentially like, well, we're going to be landscaping, so it's fine. But I don't believe I've seen any analysis about how much of the runoff would have been mitigated by the trees that are there that is being lost versus what the landscape would be. And maybe that's a conversation for the landscape section, but, trees, especially, relatively mature trees like the ones that are going to be removed for tens of thousands of square feet across the site, mitigate 65% more water than lawn. And newly landscaped trees are not going to mitigate that amount of water. I guess it seems like the peer reviewer was asking for a little bit more information about how that was taken into account when developing this stormwater runoff plan. And the answer was basically like, well, we don't have to look at the local bylaw. So I guess I'm looking for more of that conversation now. Is more of that information being taken into account?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I could address I think she's implying about land coverage and how land coverage changes runoff characteristics or vice versa.
Right, the kind of land coverage.
Yeah, so that's addressed in the plan. I think the comment actually talked about actually identifying trees per se, but our stormwater report includes pre-development and post-development watershed maps, which is basically where water gets distributed and conveyed throughout the property. And through those areas comes peak flows, but that's tied to times of concentration, which Janet had asked more information on, and we provided that. So it's the speed at which runoff travels through that particular watershed, and also land coverage. So as alluded to, if a wooded area would allow water to travel perhaps slower than if it was on asphalt, obviously. And as water travels over a wooded area or grassed areas, there's infiltrations, there's curve numbers, we call them, CNs. So in essence, that's accounted for, that's built into the whole peak flow analysis. So something like that is addressed as part of our stormwater analysis.
So could you sort of point to where that would have been accounted for? I guess, as Michael said earlier, like, we are not necessarily accustomed to looking at things with this level of complexity or technical evidence. So, I mean, I would appreciate any amount of sort of specifically pointing to where in your stormwater management you talked about the different types of landscape coverage. Like, I understand that impervious surfaces obviously don't allow any infiltration versus green surfaces, but I also do know as an arborist that tree woodscape, especially unlandscaped tree woodscape that has leaf litter and such, infiltrates groundwater better than lawn, especially if this lawn is irrigated, which we haven't even talked about yet. So, I mean, I couldn't see in here any direct comparison of, you know, wooded areas versus landscaped areas and how that changes stormwater flow.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we can do that. That'd be a pretty deep dive in this public forum to go through watershed maps and then go through outputs.
I don't think we can do
HydroCAD.
it live.
Yeah, okay.
But, you know, like I said, I think we're going to have some kind of
Yeah.
follow-up on this.
I mean,
and it'll
I
just be-
will say, unless I'm mistaken, Horsley Witten did not question that aspect of the design. So,
Yeah.
you know, perhaps maybe this is a good time to, you know, to,
Yeah, well, we'll get to that in a second, but I do want to cover a few more things.
Okay.
That move a little bit away from the stormwater, unless someone else wants to. Frank, do you have any thoughts, or Alexandria, you want to talk about stormwater any more, or should we move on to some other things?
Sorry to be a pain, but can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go for it.
So, in the clean water runoff evaluation, you talked about the difference in the square footage of the top of the roof, of the garage spaces relative to what is there and what is designed. But the top of the current garage has been closed off to cars. Does that change, and has been, I believe, for years, does that not change the evaluation of what is clean runoff versus not clean runoff if there aren't cars allowed on the top?
Well, I should say cars are allowed legally on the top of the garage. We shut it off for practical purposes because we don't need it. But I think it'd be unfair to say, to compare it to clean runoff, because we could just remove the barriers and start using the top of the garage still. The existing condition is that it's designed as a garage, you know, its practical function would be to park cars on it. Like, if we weren't going to do the project, we'd obviously want to open up the garage again and probably get some value out of it.
So, I just had a few questions. So on the north side of the building, in the, you know, the plans are a little bit small for me to read. It looks like it's sloping away from the building, though, and I don't see any drainage structures there. Is it just sheet flow around the perimeters, or that's, there's no
Is there a good-
swales or anything like that?
Is there a
That
good
directs
drawing
it
for
from,
Terry to pull up?
Yeah, Terry,
So-
maybe actually,
to keep it from going out
I mean,
with
this
Prescott?
is, if you could scroll up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you guys see my cursor, or
Yeah.
my laser? So there's run-on from this hill. So this hill's maybe about 10 feet higher than this area here.
Yeah, I'm just looking from the building back to the limit of work area.
Exactly, yeah. So in short, to answer your question, there's a high point right about here where I'll call it proposed runoff goes this way. And then from this point, plan left, there's a sway hood that we designed that travels around the building and then goes on its way. So all this runoff today goes there. It hits the garage and runs along the garage. In the proposed condition, we actually maintain a swale, so it's not running against the building per se. However, we are going to be working with the architect on modified foundation design here, such that, you know, there's no finished material that's touching the grass area here. But yeah, the design intention is to have a swale. We thought about creating a basin here and having a catch basin and then piping it around. I didn't feel comfortable with that. I'd rather rely on gravity to get water around. I did not want to rely on infrastructure, because if that infrastructure perhaps gets clogged, then we have a problem, we have a depression. So I think it's good practice to maintain positive pitch around the building.
Yeah.
That's not to say that we can't put, I'll call it on-grade catch basins in the swale to capture runoff, but I think we should maintain
Or check
positive
dams
pitch
or
around
something
the
like
building.
that, or
Excuse me?
check dams or something like that?
I don't know if we want to do check dams, because,
Or
this is going to be...
Want to slow it down?
Yeah, well, I don't think the speed is a concern. It's conveyance. So like, we could put a catch basin every 100 feet on grade to capture runoff. And then as, during construction plans, we could actually micro-design this so that there's a swale, a macro swale, but then there's actually a micro swale inside the swale to really direct water runoff in like a linear fashion. So yeah, that's something that we can do. But I would, me personally, I would not create a depression back there, because that's what happens on the Avalon property. And it's subject to failure, in my opinion.
So what makes me nervous is that you said that you're going to have the water running in that direction around the property. And it really comes to a pinch point, right, with 39 Prescott, right? There's about, I think it's 16 feet, 16 and a half feet.
Yeah.
And, that is real close, right, for a large building. And I understand the elevation changes involved here. But, if I were in that property, I would be doubly concerned now that not just is the building really close, but also we're going to have water running right by the corner of our property.
But it's less water than the existing condition.
I understand.
And the garage, which is like, I think the closest structure on that property, is close to 6 feet higher than where any water would be traveling. So, I personally don't see it being a concern.
Okay.
As long as we maintain positive pitch, coupled with the fact that it's all going to be wooded, and the watershed to that, it's going to be wooded and grassed. I understand your question. My response would be, I don't see how water would back up onto that property unless there was a failure at some point.
Well, we've had failures.
Yeah, we've had some
Which
pretty
is
severe
why,
ones.
we could have just put a basin back there, and it would look nice on paper.
Yeah.
But I think maintaining positive pitch around that building is the right thing to do.
Does the topography of that property change at all, or are you going to marry into that?
Yeah, so I think I guess I'll let Dave provide some color here. I think there's some encroachment here. And as we took out the sidewalk here. So the water, the traveled water is going to be between where my laser is, and then you'll see like the graded slope here. This is a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 slope right here. So that water is going to be conveyed in this swale where my laser is. Excuse my shaky hands.
Right.
But then on the top side of that swale, you could see we graded it out more modestly so that there's a plateau. So, and that marries right into the side yard of 39 Prescott.
Right, so the corner, bottom left corner, or the back, yes.
Yeah.
That's going to be at the correct, that's going to be
Yeah.
at the same height it is now.
Yeah, that all marries in. The removal of that proposed sidewalk, another benefit to that was we took out any retaining wall that was in that area at that pinch point. So all that's going to be flush here. And then, like I said, we created a plateau because there's going to be additional plantings from what you previously saw along this whole side lot line here.
Okay.
All right. So the only recharge you have is this infiltration system, right? There's no retention or
Yeah,
detention basins?
yeah, this site has a lot of impervious on it, and the project takes credit for that. There is a slight increase of impervious, I think .03 acres, and that that infiltration system takes a quarter or a third of the left side of the building, and the courtyard by which rain falls in, and then it infiltrates that. And then it gets metered out and goes on its way.
Yeah, I don't know. I know it's, you're offsetting the difference, right?
Yeah.
Versus,
Yeah, the standard
you'd
is to-
have a lot more if there wasn't a garage on
Yeah,
this
yeah, the
site.
standard is to mitigate the existing condition, not to eliminate stormwater from the site.
Drainage from the garage, is that, I couldn't see if you had oil water separators. Is it tied into the storm drain or
Yeah,
the sanitary?
Yeah, that's a good question, stormwater. So like this, the middle part of this building is called, the garage, where it is the garage. That runoff gets collected in its own separate little subsystem here, and then will get discharged into a hydrodynamic separator to get cleaned, and then goes on its way into the drainage system.
And there's something like that present on the property now for the garage? The existing garage?
There is, I mean, it's probably close to 40 or 50 years old when it was built. I mean, it looked like a metal contraption. It was hard to kind of see everything, but we did open it up, and that's how we found that it discharges right into the swale right here. So yes, there's something. I can't attest to like the functionality of it. It didn't look like it's been cleaned.
So what happens, does it need to be cleaned? Like that separator?
Yeah, from what I saw, I don't even know how you would clean it.
Does your future system need to be cleaned?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's a much easier, simpler system that would get, vac, you'd have a Vector truck, and easily accessible too.
Yeah, do you have there's like a operations
Yeah, the
and
stormwater report
O&M
has
plan,
an
right?
operation and maintenance manual that, Horsley Witten had commented on, and we've made it more robust.
It just, I might be confused, but I feel like I've been involved in projects before where garage drainage had to be tied into sanitary versus storm.
Yeah, the inside of the garage.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I
Yeah.
mean by that is this stormwater, oops, did this thing run out? Oh, no, there we go. Yeah, it's just a rooftop, goes into the stormwater.
Okay.
There'll be sanitary traps for like snow melt inside the garage that will go to the sewer. But
Oh,
it's not
okay.
appreciable runoff. I'm talking about the runoff, rainwater that's gonna fall on the roof of this.
Okay, all right, so all the lower levels, how many floors is the garage?
It's 5 stories, I think. Matches the building.
Yeah,
Top
so
level
so
gets
the
what's
so the top
there.
level is tied into storm, and the other 4 levels are into sanitary,
Yes.
and they're going through an oil water separator and
Yeah, go
all
through
that
the
stuff as well.
separator. That's the building code / plumbing code.
Right. Okay. Those are all the drainage questions I had.
Ms. Jacobs, Ms. Rutherford, anything that you want to add before we move on from stormwater?
No comments.
I don't have any comments at this moment in time, but I will reserve the right to come back.
Please do. All right, last one, and I mentioned it a moment ago, but the setback, the 16.5-foot setback, it is real close, right? And this is a fairly large property, and, I appreciate that the standard that we go by here is financial viability, right? That you guys need to be able to build something that is possible to build. And so I guess my question is that if you were to pull that back 5 feet or 10 feet, what would be the impact on your guys' ability to build this?
Okay. Yeah, I think from that's more like a big picture design question. I think, as Phil pointed out, we think we can technically comply with where the building is now. And we haven't gotten our, global feedback from the design peer review, and I think we wanted to address those things in general.
Yeah.
The constraint on this site is the face of the current garage. You'll see the face of this garage to the south is essentially the same location as the face of the existing garage. Because when you get beyond that, you start to get into easements. There's sewer lines, water lines, power lines, things like that. And so the depth of the garage is dictated by the ramps working, right? You have to get to the right level to clear the right heights and create parking. So there's not necessarily that much flexibility in the actual rectangle that is the garage to make the full circulation work in an efficient design. I think overall, while we've been trying to consider, since my first meeting with the neighbors who live there, what are the options, whether it's shifting right or left or back or forth or shrinking. And I think that's still under consideration with our architectural team pending other design comments.
Right, and I understand that we're going to have a design and architectural review,
Yep.
but, I'm going to mention it every time it comes up in this meeting, just because I want to emphasize that, to me, that is one of the most important things, right? We also have the setbacks along Prescott Street, but at least there you have the street in between, but I think those matter as well. And so, that should be, when we get to the design phase, I really want us to do a deep dive into those setbacks, because, I understand that you have a physical limitation to the size of the lot, and you are trying to fit in a viable number of units to make this all work, and I appreciate the challenge that requires. But insofar as it impacts the community, those are the things that are going to impact folks the most, is how close you are to those setbacks.
No, that's understood, and I think also when we get into the design, there's three dimensions here, right? The height, where is their
Yep.
house? What is the height of our building? How is that distance buffered by other factors, I think? So we're trying to take all those factors into consideration in making the design work.
So what are the easements that are limiting you from moving the building towards the south?
Do you have a good
Yeah.
existing?
I mean, if we wanted to jump files, Terry, I could show you, but I guess let me dictate this. to
Yeah,
you.
just describe.
Yeah, so,
I guess, are they,
yeah, so basically just south of this sidewalk here, which is 5 feet off the leading edge of the building.
Terry, are you able to point with a cursor on there for folks online? Because that would probably be helpful for that.
So
Yeah, there we go.
there's a water easement that is bounded by the face of this sidewalk right here, essentially. Right there, yeah.
an easement for a water line?
Yeah, there's a main water line.
Public water
Public
service.
water,
So it's an easement with the town?
yeah, yep. And then the electrical easement actually overlaps the water easement that's further south. And then there's a sewer easement that's running through the swale. So
So the
the,
sewer is an easement with the town as
yeah,
well?
they're all easement, yeah, we have national
electric
grid.
grid.
National Grid is the electric easement.
Yeah, and then sewer and water is with the town for their benefit. But the critical easement is the water easement. That's the one that's 5 feet off the proposed building.
Is the water line actually in the easement? I mean, I've come across
yeah.
this before, we've had easements and then, the utilities aren't.
No, it's in
actually
there. Yeah, because
I
we
couldn't-
tapped,
I couldn't-
we tapped
I
that.
couldn't read, I couldn't see the water line on the plan.
Well, this is the grading plan, so you
I
have to
know,
go to the utility plan.
but I meant on the utility plan.
Yeah,
My eye's just gonna read it, but,
It's, yeah, I mean, last time I checked, it's in there. Yeah. It's in-
I'm just saying, yeah.
It's there because. when
My
we-
eyes, not.
When we did the Avalon phase, the East Mill, we tied into to that water line.
Mm-hmm.
So it's there.
That's the closest easement though, right?
That's
To
the
water line?
closest easement, yep.
I guess I may have one last question. Avalon West Mill said there's a 32-inch pipe over there,
I believe it's a 36-inch pipe.
36-inch pipe, and where does that end up? Where does that go?
Yeah, good question. So, let me tell you where it starts first. So, at the intersection of Prescott and High, there's some drainage infrastructure that it takes a catch basin and a manhole on the west side of the High Street, or the Avalon side of High Street, and then it goes into, I think, a 12 and then an 18 And then that pipe used to run there used to be a large swale on the north side of Sutton Pond condominiums that bypassed I guess it's the
bypassed
Mill-
Osgood Pond
Osgood Pond and went
and
right
went
into
to
Sutton
Sutton
Pond. So to answer your question, that 36-inch pipe basically starts at the intersection of High Street and Prescott, travels through the property parallel to the on-site drainage for the Avalon West Mill, and then on the west side of that project, there's a retaining wall, and it dumps through that head wall, as does the site drainage for Avalon, and then from there, it bypasses Osgood and makes its way into Sutton Pond, just upstream of the dam.
So is there any possibility of tying some of this into that?
Well, I think that's what we're talking about. Hydraulically, that 36-inch pipe came about because during the construction of the Avalon West Mill, there was a substantial rainstorm at that time, nothing like in 2023, but the manhole covers actually started to pop from the on-site drainage. So we went back to the order of condition, we went back to conservation and got that 36-inch pipe approved. Essentially, the size of the pipe was determined we did a cursory review of the Prescott neighborhood drainage system, and it's essentially all 12-inch pipe. But Avalon made a business decision of putting the largest pipe that can physically fit in that vertical space through the property.
Okay, so the water that comes off the back of the hill is going to swirl around to the left side of the picture here and heads down. Is that water going to end up into that manhole?
No, that all goes,
That-
where my cursor is, that goes down page or south on High
Right.
Street.
So then it's going to go down High Street and then through the mills and then eventually
Yeah.
get to Sutton Pond.
Exactly. Yeah, it all gets to the same spot. So
Right,
it's a matter
so
of,
my question is there any way to take some of this stuff and go across High Street, tie into that manhole or to that?
Yeah, there's
and
actually-
keep the
there's-
water out of the bills?
yeah, there's actually a few easy spots where we can dissect or divorce the connection of pipes, allow some to continue on its way, and then to go
Right,
to,
yeah, I'm just thinking keep it out of the mill instead of taking all this going down High Street, back through the mill. Can't just cut across High Street and tie into that. I don't know.
Yeah, it sounded like that needed further discussion with DPW to look at the volume that they expect for that.
yeah, we
pipe.
need to circle back with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
bringing that
that's-
up. That's what we're talking about.
Well, are you talking about doing that with the drainage from this project or from the public drainage that's up in the Prescott Street
No, the public drainage already goes
into the third?
goes into that, although I would argue that poorly positioned catch basins allow for the bypass of that runoff on Prescott, and it runs onto High Street, and then goes through the tunnel, or the culvert, I should say, that runs through West Mill, the parking lot at West Mill. So, this is, even though, analyzing drainage is technically a science, this is a little bit of an art here too, because we don't know where everything is going, essentially. And there's nuance to the catch basin locations, so. And Prescott's coming down at 10%, so.
And then, I'm looking at all these drawings, and it shows, it's calling out Mill Pond, which I think, is what on this plan as Mill Pond,
Yeah, it's different.
it's different, it's the mill,
Machine shop.
machine shop pond, is that
Yeah,
what?
yeah, so Mill Pond is the pond behind East Mill. You see on that plan there, it's slightly to the, to the southeast of the project location. Osgood Pond is the pond that's on the west side of West Mill,
Right.
and as you
Sutton
approach
Pond.
Sutton Pond,
But
Sutton Pond
Where was
owns
Machine shop?
Yeah, I thought
Mill
one of the
Pond was
first,
up by,
where it showed the lake, and then it showed Mill Pond, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
it showed machine
Oh,
shop.
Yeah.
the
So,
last slide.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you go to the-
because I was talking,
I'm just being, I just want to make sure that, right?
Yeah.
So, like
Yeah, that's the Mill Pond.
well,
Yeah,
Here's
but you got a mill pond down here at Stevens
Yeah,
Pond,
no, that's
right?
another
So-
Mill Pond. No, this machine shop pond, I think, where'd you get this from?
We've always called this,
No,
we've always called this one Mill Pond.
Yeah, so Apex, you can see in the source there, Apex called it Machine Shop Pond. I don't know why. Maybe to distinguish it from the mill pond upstream, up by those other mills. But, yeah, it's traditionally been called Mill Pond on all our surveys. And
Yeah, I just, that's throwing me off, that's all.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was,
Yeah, I think
me as
to the
well.
point, that asset that's on the Avalon Bay property was created just to take the public runoff through there. So Avalon Bay has their own drainage system. And so that pipe is available. We've had discussions in the past about the opportunity to utilize that with Public Works. At the same time, we've tried, in trying to design this project in a way that meets all the standards, we assumed we had to come into the same points that this project goes into now. And so we'd have to get some authority to come across the street into different public infrastructure
So
to utilize that.
from what I understand, back a few years ago when we had the issues at Mill Pond, it was because the sewer drained, or the drainage ran under the mills. So I guess my point is if we could take some of that out of the equation, that bring it under the mill and cut it across High Street and take it down that, get it to Osgood Pond a different way, and it'll alleviate some of the issues at Mill Pond, or going under the mills would be a
Yeah.
benefit to me, a plus in my mind. That's
Yeah,
all.
as the manager of those mills, we would much prefer
Right, so-
that be avoided. And the consultant's report talked about that too, that there's a specific, very tough to change bottleneck at the mills. Just a lot of stuff coming into one spot where you have some large pipes, but they're not big enough, whereas there's capacity downstream.
Yeah.
So if we could bypass around there, certainly we appreciate, being able to leverage better public infrastructure there.
so you're talking with the DPW to see if you can make, and you would make that change to the plan if they can agree to it? Is that, so what,
Well, we had initial discussion with them a few months back, before we submitted this project. And then I think we made a decision to present the project on its own merits without using other infrastructure, because again, that would require a more global approach. And our stormwater report focuses on runoff leaving our property. So, but if we did that, the analysis point would have to be, say, Osgood Pond, to show a mitigation. You understand what I'm saying? Like, right now, everything goes to High Street, and we mitigate High Street, but there's zero runoff going to Prescott Street, mainly because Prescott Street's higher, but at the intersection, everything continues to go south. But if we were to show a pipe that goes into Prescott Street, then on paper, in tabular form, we'd be showing no runoff going there in existing condition, and then 10 CFS going there in the 100-year storm in the proposed condition. So, which technically would not meet the regulatory requirements. However, if we looked at, instead of the point of analysis being the intersection of High Street and Prescott, it's now Osgood Pond, which is 1,000 feet away, then yeah, we would show. So we didn't want to be presumptuous and come to present the project in that fashion. We wanted to engage in this conversation right here before doing that.
All right, any more questions before we bring on
well,
Jim?
I'm not sure how that gets closed out, so,
Yeah.
in what we've just heard, it sounds like,
It would be a benefit.
right, well, it might be a little bit more challenging to, do the drainage reports and.
No, it's not a challenge, it just needs to, there needs to, I think we should hear from Horsley Witten, and I think we need to, if we're gonna go that route, which is fine, there just needs to be a relative change in our analysis point, which is very easy to do.
Yeah, and I think we discussed earlier, I for one would like us to follow up with that and have some more of a global sense of water flow and how this contributes its share of that, right? Because I take your point
I'm just
that,
wondering how, it's not us having the discussion, it's
No.
town DPW or Horsley Witten.
right, it would be asking them to follow up with us.
Yes.
With a larger understanding of that. And and, you know, I take your point that, like, the flooding is obviously not just coming from this one property. In fact, it might be a small portion, but I think it would be nice to add quantitative data to that, or at least estimation to that, of what does it look like as a contribution to water flow larger.
Yeah, the quantitative analysis for our site is easy.
Yeah.
It gets complicated when you look at a greater watershed. So, but we can make some, reasonable assumptions, anecdotal evidence,
Yeah.
But it also requires some valuable input from DPW, because they have the maps and infrastructure and institutional knowledge. So, yeah, we would welcome that conversation.
Okay. All right, so let's see if we can make that happen.
Okay.
Who makes that happen? Do you reach out to the
yeah,
DPW?
we're gonna-
They'll reach out to the DPW. I can also follow up and make sure that the conversation's happening.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm just-
because, I need to be, to your suggestion earlier, need to be reaching out for comment to all of these departments anyway. And so my intention is to get comment from, to send it out, I keep meaning to, but I need to send it out this week with the intention of getting an answer by April from those departments.
Okay.
And so hopefully that will contribute to that conversation as well.
Okay.
All right. We'll have a chance
That's
to
drainage.
talk with the applicant again later, following the peer reviewer and public comment, but I do want to be able to get to those, especially because the community has been waiting for a while. So, Ms. Bernardo, would you like to come forward? And you're welcome to, gentlemen, if you're okay with sitting down so she can come sit.
You want to sit down, Jen?
Okay, all right, never mind then.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
For the record, my name is Janet Bernardo. I'm a professional civil engineer with the Horsley Witten Group, and we were brought on by the ZBA to conduct a review of this project at 0 Prescott Street. We initially reviewed the project and provided you with a letter dated December 16th. We had a conversation with the applicant to kind of discuss our letter and their responses on January 30th. And then we received their response on February 11th. We have reviewed their response. We have not prepared a second letter yet, but we wanted to kind of come tonight and hear the concerns. I can do kind of a quick rundown of how the stormwater management, handbook and those standards that are required. The applicant is required to meet the state stormwater standards. There's a stormwater management handbook that it's kind of like the engineering Bible that we all work with. And then there's the local regulations. Because this is a comprehensive permit, they are required to meet the state permit, the state handbook, but not necessarily the local. They have asked for a global waiver of the stormwater bylaws from the town, which, as you kind of already discussed, it might be easier for them to specifically ask for the few waivers of that stormwater bylaw that they really need. Because they do meet many of them, and they have been able to provide that response, but they have kind of just asked for it in a global, which is not an uncommon process, but it's also nice to just be like, we just want to ask for different pipes, so it's different. So but the Mass Stormwater Handbook has 10 standards. The first one is to make sure that they're not causing any erosion in a wetland. This project has different watersheds that are basically going into the municipal systems, so they can pretty easily prove that they are meeting that first standard because they're not discharging directly into a wetland. What we typically do is look at the different watersheds and catchment areas that are just being described and their design points or their point of analysis that where the water is going off-site, because they're not allowed to increase that water off any property line. That's the goal that they need to meet from the state standards. So we look at the different watershed areas and we kind of agree or disagree with what they're looking at. Right now, there's this very large building in the middle of the site, takes up most of the site, and it's a good amount of impervious area, which they will remove and construct basically another large building, but it's two buildings with a garage in the middle that's all attached to each other, as you are aware. So we kind of look at the different standards, and we kind of question, how is this actually part of that point of analysis or not? And then, but we get to the final, do they cause erosion in a wetland? And they're not, but they have adjusted and made some corrections for what we had asked for in our initial review letter. One of the areas that we always pay attention to are the wetlands, and the closest one being the mill pond, which, thank you for asking about that, because I kept looking, I'm like, why is the star up there and the mill pond's way down there? I don't understand. So understanding that drainage area, as you've also discussed on High Street, and all those different catch basins and all the different pipes that connect to each other, we found it very confusing. Phil's tried to explain it to us a few times. I still found it confusing. I was getting a little closer by the end of the discussion here, so that was really helpful. But they need to show that they're not increasing runoff to the point that it does under existing conditions, which is why they have done the analysis as they have and not gone down to that 36-inch pipe, which would be a great solution if the DPW agrees with it. So they do need DPW's buy-in. But they do need to do the analysis on the High Street stormwater catch basins and that 12-inch pipes that are in High Street, and that's where they have to look at, because that's where they're going under existing conditions. There's 4 different points of analysis, and point of analysis number 2 is the High Street system. So they've looked at that. We've added a bunch of comments. I kind of appreciated that you guys commented, made questions on all the ones that I have kind of circled as something else to talk about. So standard number 2 is proving that they do not increase their runoff to any of those different points from pre-development conditions. So they have to show either they are removing impervious surface, they are putting in subsurface infiltration systems, surface basins, whatever the stormwater practices are to reduce any peak flows that are coming off-site. So they're proposing one small, I thought it was kind of small, they could have potentially made it larger, but they didn't need to for their calculation purposes, subsurface chamber system that's in between, well, according to the buildings. And they are capturing their roof runoff for the deck of the garage in a water quality system that will then be piped to the High Street municipal system. Everything basically is going back to High Street. There's the 3 other sections, but those are really all being reduced. So they kind of come out of the equation. It's the High Street system that's the kind of the critical point. But they are reducing their flow. We asked them to do some double checking on some of the numbers. We asked them to check the time of concentration, how long it takes water to flow from point A to point B, and is it the same under existing and proposed conditions. The amount of woods, trees, those different parts of the equation, the area, the surface cover, the soils underneath, all of that information is put into their calculations, which is using the HydroCAD methodology. And so we looked at their different areas, their different surfaces, their curve numbers. We looked at all those numbers and commented where we had a concern, which was basically the time of concentration, I think, was the one area that we wondered about. We did note the difference bylaw and what your regulations actually call for to make sure that you understood what you were waiving. That was kind of the point of going through them step by step. They are reducing their peak volume, which, again, like that's in your regulation, which is great. Many communities do have that. It makes it a little bit harder for the applicants to meet that requirement compared to peak flow. But they are able to meet that as well, even though they've asked for their blanket. waiver. They're meeting, like, that's one of the ones that they are meeting. They're meeting, we asked them to tell us where the water's flowing, which is the Merrimack River Basin, eventually goes to Osgood Pond behind the West Mill. That's one of your requirements. Again, they'd asked for a waiver, but they also gave us the answer. So for many of these different comments, they gave us the answer, with the exception of the trees, and that was basically, there's a big building there. I didn't think they were removing too many trees. I'm still not sure if they're removing very many trees, if any. But they either haven't found any particular tree clusters, they didn't want to go out and have a surveyor locate all of the trees and determine. They just asked for the waiver. You can decide if that's a worthwhile waiver to give them or not. There may not be any trees to even be talking about. I'm not sure. But there's a pretty big building that's out there right now. But if they're removing an acre of trees, it's definitely something to talk about, and something frequently applicants are like, you're going to make me flag and count every tree in an acre? There might be, a giant elm tree in the middle of it that you really want to preserve. I'm not really sure what's out there, but that's kind of the idea of the regulation. They didn't include profiles of the drainage trunk lines, but as is likely the intent of that is to make sure that there's no conflicts with other utilities. They did say that they reviewed to make sure that there was no conflicts. They didn't provide the profiles, but they reviewed and said there's no conflicts. So it would be in their best interest to make sure there's no conflicts, because that's really a bummer when you get to construction and you've now hit something. So that's on their best interest to make sure that they don't have any problems. The DPW conversation, J, and on page 4 of 10, that I think is an important conversation to be had, recommending whether the pipes on the property itself can handle the 25-year storm. That again is it's to their benefit to have pipes that are able to handle the larger storm events. But that's what they're saying is but if they hit the 12-inch pipe that's in the street, they might as well hold it all back on their property already, which is what they're doing. They're reducing their flow, they're reducing their volume, and so it's going through a process. There's not that many pipes. It probably wouldn't be that hard for them to tell us that they can handle the 25-year storm. I'd be surprised if they can't. Maybe they can't. So it's interesting that they chose not to give you that information, but again, it's on their property, so they maybe are like, they don't feel the need to meet that requirement. But it is a discussion with the DPW and the flood manager study, and understanding that piece I can see is really critical to the whole flooding of the area. We noted the waiver about the pipes, so that's a really common requirement that many communities have, to have the RCP pipes, the reinforced concrete pipes. It's kind of was the standard for a long time. They have a lot of, amount of cover that goes over them. Everybody sees the concrete pipes as being really sturdy and strong, and they do like to put them in the municipal streets. We've been using the HDPE pipes for 20 years or more. It's very comparable. We would have no issue with the waiver on those pipes, and but it is a very common requirement that most communities do have, and everybody asks for the waiver.
Very silly question there, but and this is a little beyond the purview. Are communities removing that requirement ever?
It's a lot to go back and change your regulation.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if you're doing a bunch of other changes, why not throw it into the town meeting
Yeah,
warrant
it's-
or something like that?
I think there's still, the town engineers are like, well, we really like the reinforced concrete pipe. Okay. But it is, like, you see them putting in the HEP on all of the sites. There are two guys who are like walking down the street, popping them in. It's very fast, very easy. They connect well. Sometimes they get broken before they get in the ground, but once they're in the ground, they're usually, not a problem unless they hit it with the excavator before that gets covered with fill. So you're not hearing about them cracking and breaking and having, crushing. So they've been working pretty well for about a good 20 years.
Seems like they've just been waiting on a longer test period of the HDPE
Yeah.
before they commit to
I
changing
think it's
the
like
code.
maybe they need the 50 years to really be comfortable that they're solid.
The same thing with cast iron and commercial buildings versus PVC,
Right.
They won't make that change either.
They won't make make that change either. So that standard 2 was again the pre and post, so they had to prove that. They were able to prove that their post-development peak flow does not increase over their pre-development peak flow, which is one of the key pieces for the Mass Stormwater Handbook. Again, it doesn't fix the flooding problem, but it doesn't make it worse. And that's kind of what their charge is, to not make something worse. But they don't have to totally correct a problem that's downstream of their site. Standard 3 is about recharge and requiring a property to recharge a certain volume of stormwater. They are putting in that subsurface chamber system to increase their additional impervious cover. That there's a calculation for a type of soil that goes along with the area, and they figure out the volume, and then they make sure that they are infiltrating that amount of volume on site. So they were able to meet that requirement, as well as how quickly it takes to draw down, because you have to have your chamber system underneath, and it has to be able to infiltrate in a certain amount of time. Within 3 days, so the next storm comes, it's empty and ready to go again. And they were able to prove that they had 4 feet of separation between the seasonal high groundwater and the bottom of their chamber, which is one of the requirements that keeps you from having to go through a whole nother bunch of calculations. So they met the standard 3 requirement by putting in their subsurface chamber system and meeting their recharge. Standard 4 is about water quality, and that includes treating 1 inch of volume over the impervious surface, which was the same volume that they used for their increase for their standard 3. And they also provided the water quality units, like the garage roof, the deck is coming down and going into a water quality unit, so that is basically, it's like a parking lot on the garage, top of the garage is the parking lot. And so they needed to make sure that that water is clean before it gets into the rest of the system. So that's the whole water quality piece, is making sure everything's clean. So they have passed them through different systems, whether it's going through the chamber system or going through a swale or going through some of the grasses and the catch basins. They all provide some water quality. And so they're improving the water quality before it leaves the site. And they were able to meet that requirement as well.
Sorry, did the catch basins in the driveway have water quality?
The catch basins catch basins themselves, the new catch basins need to have a 4-foot sump.
That's it.
And so if you have a 4-foot sump, it counts as 25% removal of sediment, total suspended solids, and that's like the sands and the leaves and whatnot that kind of gather. So if they have a 4-foot sump, that meets the 25%. They have to meet 80% before it leaves the site. So they have other pieces. There's water quality units involved, and there's the roof runoff is considered clean from the buildings, from the residential buildings, so that's clean roof. So they don't have to do anything with that. They're just having that be piped down into the system. Did I answer?
So the stuff from the driveway doesn't need an oil water separator?
The
I know coming out of the garage.
That does,
top-
but the parking lot, so there's some parking and a driveway, and that has catch basins and then a swale. Is that where it ends, catch basins and a swale?
I'm sorry, say that again.
The impervious driveway on the right-hand side, it has catch basins.
It has catch basins.
And then does it go into a swale, or does it have a
No,
water
that gets
quality unit?
piped. The swale, that's, so there's catch basins up in this area and a trench drain, that collects
Oh,
everything.
the trench drain.
That gets piped into this manhole and then goes on its way. The front parking lot drains via, I guess, an existing LID technique, which is into the swale here. So there's no reveal along that pavement. It flows into the swale.
Yeah.
And effectively, as I mentioned in my responses, because the garage, the garage flowed into that, now it's not. We're effectively increasing the capacity and effectiveness of that swale simply by reducing the watershed contributing into it.
There's the large swale below, on the southern part
Yeah.
of the whole site. There's a big, large, open grass area that's existing. And under existing conditions, the whole garage kind of gets piped towards that big swale area, as well as a bunch of the parking lot. And that goes through the culvert that then is it's an existing 18-inch pipe that goes in. But by eliminating the garage that's going into there, they only are now capturing the parking lot runoff, that's the surface runoff, in that swale that goes through the 18-inch pipe. And then the garage is piped, that goes to the water quality unit and gets piped over, and the roof runoff from the two the two residential buildings also gets piped over.
Okay.
You following that?
Yeah, so anything from the driveway or the parking lot that's in front, as far as
Water quality.
water quality is being handled by
By
the
primarily
swale.
either catch basins or that large swale that's,
So there's no real oil water separator involved?
there's just
Does
the
a
one for
swale
the
do that?
garage.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one for the garage.
Is that something that you would?
I don't know, I know I've had it in parking lots before, when I've been involved in projects, we've had to put in oil water separators and catch
Yeah,
basins.
they frequently do to meet their requirement.
I didn't know if a swale
You have me wondering though, so
replaces
that
that.
on the right-hand side, you have your 25%. How are you getting 80% on the right, for all of the runoff on the right-hand side?
Well, that's, some of it is a redevelopment, right?
So that's the maximum extent practicable?
Yeah.
So it may be beneficial to add a water quality unit for the runoff that's coming from catch basins on the right-hand side, to improve the water quality there as well. It's not a hard ask.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, and it's a good, Standard 5 is about land uses with higher potential pollutant loads, so this will not have more than 1,000 trips per day, is that true?
I don't think the traffic study generated 1,000 trips per day.
So if there's certain types of uses, like gas stations, or large parking lot, mall-type parking lots that have over 1,000 vehicle trips per day that count as a land use that's a higher potential pollutant load. It would create more pollution than a residential house would. There's a number of options. This does not meet any of those, so they don't have to do standard 5. It's just adding a few more extra requirements along the way. Standard 6 is also if it's discharging into a critical area, a vernal pool, a wellhead, and they're not doing that, so they don't have to do anything for standard 6. Standard 7 is about redevelopment, and this project is a mix of new and redevelopment. And so they are required to meet some of the standards only to the maximum extent practicable, which includes like standard 1, if they were discharging into a pipe that went into a river, they could still discharge to that same pipe, they just couldn't make it worse, but they didn't have to change it all if it's a redevelopment. So it gives them a little bit more leeway on some things, but most applicants try to meet all the standards to the fullest extent because it's the right thing to do. So everybody tries to meet it to the full extent unless they can't. So they have to kind of say maximum extent practicable, and unless it's like ridiculously expensive to kind of go back through the whole thing. One of the questions that I did have is the deck, and we will get to operation, maintenance, and erosion control. And if you have snow, which we've turned out we've had a lot of lately, on that deck, what will happen to it? Will it get plowed on and left on the deck? Will it get removed from the top parking lot? Can the weight, I assume that the structural integrity of it
Yeah.
has accounted for a lot of snow, but is it accounting for plowed snow
Yeah,
in a ones?
that's a good question.
Turns out it's been snowing lately. So all of a sudden, something I was thinking about, like, so what happened with those garages? Standard 8 is about erosion control during construction primarily, and they have various erosion control barriers that are around the site. They will have stockpiles during construction. They cannot let any sediment leave the site during construction, or DEP comes down, EPA, everybody gets mad. And so the idea is that they should not, they need to contain it all. So they have an erosion control plan. We had some suggestions that they were able to accommodate, and I'd made some adjustments to the plans to go along with what we were suggesting. There is because it's over an acre, they will be required to provide a stormwater pollution prevention plan. It's something that the contractor provides, but frequently the engineers help along the way and provide a draft of that. The ZBA may be interested in seeing the final product and be confident that it has been written and is prepared. They need to have that done 14 days prior to construction, and receive their notice of intent from EPA to do that. They have to have written it. So many communities ask for that as a condition of approval, and it's not typically a hard ask because they have to do it for EPA anyway, but it's nice to know that it's been done.
So we'll ask for it.
Can you repeat what it's called again?
It's a
SWIP.
stormwater pollution prevention
Yep,
plan. a SWIP.
SWPPP, okay.
Yep. Standard 9 is about the operation and maintenance, so that is basically looking at all of their new stormwater structures and their various practices, new and existing, that they are reusing, and making sure that there is a regular maintenance happening all for the life of the building, structures, the whole thing. So that is something that's coming along more and more. Typically, we want, a board would want to see the owner's signature on it, so the owner has read it, understands what they're required to do, that they are supposed to look in those catch basins 4 times a year. They're supposed to clean them out once a year if the sediment gets to a certain amount. That if they're saying they're going to be sweeping the streets, they're sweeping the streets. And so that is also something that many towns will ask for a copy of, their final copy that is signed by the owner. They have provided a signed copy. It's in their stormwater report. But you might want to know that you have it and it exists. And if 10 years from now, nobody's been cleaning it and it's all maintenance, you have that to say, you really needed to go back and do this. You signed it, you said you were going to do it, and it's your obligation. So it's nice to have that, understand where that is.
So what do you mean, have them pull it out of that and make it a separate document?
Yeah,
So,
it's
yeah.
ready to be pulled right out.
Yeah.
It's easy. They will be requiring, they have said that they will have pet waste baskets around the property. We asked, they originally said that they weren't going to have any pets. They realize that they probably will. So they were going to put out pet waste baskets, something that you also may want to have some confirmation that actually gets installed and somebody is dealing with the pet waste, because it's something that gets into our waterways and it's a negative, it's definitely a negative. Again, the snow storage has been added to, there's for operation maintenance, there is a little sketch that shows where all the catch basins are, it shows where the water quality units are, it shows where the swale is, all the things that have to be maintained, the subsurface drainage system. And it's snow storage also on there. So that's when we started thinking about the garage and looking at that sketch. So that is something, so you know that where everything is. So standard, that was standard 9. Standard 10 is the illicit discharge compliance statement, which basically says that this is also signed by the owner, which they've also already provided, which is ahead of the game. Most applicants don't give you that until they're about to put the shovels in the ground. But it's basically so the property owner knows that they can't take their washing machines and put them into the storm system, that they have to keep the sanitary and the drainage separate. So today, everybody's, being good about it, but this is, kind of a practice that used to be a problem, and so it's a requirement. So there's no illicit discharge, so they already have it, it's been signed, and so those are the 10 standards. We also went through a site plan review, but do you want me to stop with stormwater?
Let's see if there's any questions first. Anybody have any?
Who enforces make sure that the basins are cleaned, and who would do that?
Well, in theory, it would be the town or basically, so you can decide how you want to enforce that. A lot of towns will say, we want to see, at the end of every year, your maintenance log that somebody went in, and usually a building of this size, they either, have a facilities person, or they maybe subcontract that out, and they have somebody come in, and it is marking it down. They have a log, and they have to say, catch basins checked, cleaned out, so much sediment was found, and if it gets taken away, there's a log that shows that, and they can provide that on an annual basis to the town if you guys desire.
To DPW, building inspector?
Because it's usually planning board or conservation that is having this discussion, it typically can be one of them, but it could be the DPW, there would be a good, it's like whoever is kind of managing the stormwater. Somebody is doing that, and usually your MS4 program that you have for the town, that's run by EPA, and they want to know that you are actually paying attention to this stuff, and that these larger developments have an O&M plan that is being taken care of and being done, and it's a box that gets checked off. So it is really, it's probably the DPW, if they're dealing with your stormwater, would be the best.
Get that note.
I have a question. First of all, thank you, Janet. This was really helpful in terms of outlining, this really answered my question earlier, which was what are the specific aspects of the local bylaw that were impractical. And I thank you for explaining that part of what you were trying to do by asking for those in this outline was to highlight what we're waiving in that request. I do still have a couple of concerns about the trees, because, one of the things you said is you don't know if any trees are being removed. And I would say, based on just like the site visits that I've done and like the rough estimates that I can make just by visual comparison on the sites, is that there's at least two sides of the project where they're removing the trees all the way back to the property line. I would say guesstimating that, at least a quarter of the property is currently wooded, and probably closer to a third, and possibly 65% of that is being removed. So I guess at what point would you say it is a significant tree cluster that's being removed? You said if it's like an acre, that would be a lot. This might be an acre, but I haven't seen any actual quantitative analysis on what percentage of the tree stand would be removed? And I have another follow-up question after that, but Janet, if you wouldn't mind
Well,
answering that.
Yeah, they can easily tell you the square footage of the area that trees are currently in that will be removed, whether that's a quarter of an acre or a full acre. They can tell you that from their HydroCAD model that had to say whether it was impervious, whether it was grass, whether it was woods. So that's an easy number for them to come up with. Counting every tree is a lot, and if this was.
Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah.
not asking for counting every tree. So like.
Yeah, but they
like,
could easily tell you their general square footage, and maybe, you're making an assumption that there's in every 10 square feet, there's, one tree or something, and then,
But however much that number is, you pointed out that it would be already factored into their
it's
HydroCAD
factored
model.
into the stormwater calculations, yes, that is.
So that was my follow-up question, because I've never used a HydroCAD program, and this was sort of the technical question that I was trying to ask earlier. It does make a calculable difference and discernment between grass and wooded area.
Yes, it definitely makes a difference. It's a different curve number, which is assigned, grass is assigned one number. It depends on the soil types. There's hydraulic soil groups, and there's A, B, C, and D. And then there's different soil, different surfaces. Impervious, roads, roofs are all the same, very high number, like a 98, so it's out of 100. And grass on a really good soil might be somewhere like 36, or woods is in the order of 30s or 40s, depending on the soil type. So, yes, grass and woods are closer than woods and pavement, but,
Yeah. No, that's really
Right.
helpful. No, that's exactly what I was looking for earlier in my question, so thank you.
Any other questions before we move on to the site plan? All right, let's move on to the site plan.
so, oops, I'm wrong page. So we also reviewed items like the parking, and as was stated earlier, they clarified the garage and the different levels and how many spaces were ADA compliant and how many spaces were going to be electric vehicle ready. Are they ready, or are they going to be EV?
Just ready, EV ready.
They're EV ready spaces.
What is the distinction? Is it just whether there is electrical wiring versus an actual hookup?
Yes.
Okay.
So the hookups, the whole little pedestal is a lot more expensive than just putting the wires in the ground.
Yeah,
But,
that makes sense.
It's nice to put the wires in before
You
the
don't have to
road's in.
tear it up then if you want to build
Right.
it later.
Right. So they clarified that, and so that was something that we were like, wait a minute, we didn't count that many. And they now have their 497 spaces, and they have an adequate number of ADA compliant, as well as the percentage of EV ready. We looked at the grading. We were concerned about the area next to 39 Prescott Street. It does seem very close. It is a pinch point. There was a walkway there with a small wall that they have removed, which I think does make that whole area flow grading. It is being graded to flow in the right direction. As drawn, it should flow exactly as Phil described. It is only 16 feet to work with, so.
It's not a lot of space, and
It's not a lot of space, but it's totally manageable, like, they can do it.
Yeah.
They can construct it, they can make it happen. You might ask for a spot grade, a topographic survey that is done as an as-built with spot grades going along that swale and that specifically in that pinch point, to confirm that it gets constructed exactly as it's designed.
Would there be any benefit to something like a French drain or something along the back of the building in case there is a slowdown in water at that pinch point?
Well, are you worried about the garage, or are you worried about 39 Prescott Street?
I'm more worried about 39 Prescott Street, which is high up.
Right, right. So, it might be something that, if the swale between that pinch point area has stone in it to really make sure that it keeps flowing instead of grass. Sometimes that stone gets messy looking after a little while. But it does allow water to continue to flow, and it's easier to see it than if it's grass clippings get kind of messed up in there. They do have some plantings. I couldn't quite figure out what the shrubs are. I don't know if they were trees or shrubs that are on that corner. I couldn't determine from the symbols what they were, but there are some trees, and there's a 5-foot black fence right along that property line.
It's really close. Right?
It's really close.
I think there's no way around that statement, right? It
Yeah.
is, I appreciate the applicant's feeling that, we've got a difference in levels here, but, and that it wouldn't be that much higher than a normal house would, but really having a house that close would also, be something that I would think about. So, it's really close.
It's close, it's close. We described, number 13, we described the retaining walls. We asked them to show them on their cross-sections to clarify exactly what that looked like, which they did add. They removed the one that was near 39 Prescott. That retaining wall has been taken away. And the other ones, we wanted to confirm what we were looking at was what they were proposing, and they were able to confirm that we saw it correctly. We also talked about building setbacks and the various zoning codes that we're trying to figure out which residential unit or industrial area they were going against. 14A is something that we're asking you to kind of focus on a little bit, understanding the intent of Subdistrict A and the historic mill area, and whether this meets the intent of that zone. So number C is again talking about 39 Prescott Street and whether the 5-foot high fence and the plantings that are proposed is adequate, and that probably the abutter that's out there is comfortable with what's being proposed, because it will be a 5-story garage building.
If I might ask just for a moment, I might ask either Carolyn or Judy maybe weigh in on this. The question about the historic mill district. We are limited under the circumstances in which we can, oppose this development. How do we consider the historic districts within that framework?
I don't know if Judy wants to jump in, but I'm happy to answer for the record. Carolyn Murray from KP Law. You treat your historic district bylaw just like every other bylaw, whether it's your stormwater bylaw or any of your zoning bylaws for purposes of the 40B. So, this is another component of your zoning bylaw. Whether they can satisfy some of those special requirements of that district, or whether they're going to have to request waivers, it'll be the same process as you've just got, that you'll have to go through, say, with respect to the waiver of the stormwater bylaw.
Okay. And so it'll be the same standard as any other rule that they're asking for a waiver from?
Exactly.
It is, and I would, bear in mind too, you certainly have a right to ask the applicant why they can't meet a particular standard. I mean, it's one thing to say we can't meet it, it's another thing to sort of challenge that. And so that's not true only with the historic piece, but any bylaw. It's like, what is it that stands in the way of meeting the town's existing standards? And, are there modifications that could be made to the project that are reasonable, that wouldn't make the project uneconomic, that would help to perhaps bring it more in compliance with existing local requirements that would otherwise apply?
Okay, thank you. And I think that is perhaps a discussion to more heavily focus on when we get to the point of a design review. But I would just encourage the applicant to know that we will probably ask about that. And it's worth going through those points and seeing where we can find avenues to comply when possible and where it's not reasonable to do so.
I make just a point about the historic district. This isn't technically in the historic district. It's not a machine shop village, this lot. So there weren't waivers requested against any standards of machine shop village standards. It's in the sub-district, which is a zoning overlay, which spans both the historic district, machine shop village, and the abutting parcels.
Okay. All right. Well, we can follow up with that when we get to the design review, but I just wanted to flag it since you did, so thank you.
Yeah, well, it's a little confusing, all the different zones that are there, so I
We have
want to
a
make
messy zoning
sure
map.
that the waivers that they're requesting are the waivers you choose to grant. That's what everybody's looking at, the same thing. And, we again, number 14C is about the setback from the residential property, and again, that is a very tight connection at that one point, the 16 feet. They also, so page 9 of 10, number D, letter D, they are talking to the building commissioner and to determine that it is the rear yard setback that is under advisement. So they may not need the waiver if they are providing 34.6 feet and they only needed 30 feet. So that was something that was a discussion point that can be kind of analyzed. And F, they may not need a waiver for the lot coverage. So understanding exactly, which waivers are needed for which districts, for which requirements is something that, they can spell out. They've started spelling it out, but they can spell it out. 15 is about design criteria. The one comment that I kind of re-looked at today was the photometric calculation plan and having any light spillover. And there's a plan at the end of their plan set that has lots of little tiny numbers all over it. And that's the light candle, foot candle numbers. And they should be basically 0 at the property lines. And they still look to me like there's some spillover. So understanding that it's not a nuisance for any neighbors, that it's not a lot of spillover, but there is some. So that should be kind of looked into it again. I think there's still some spillover. And we suggested that they.
Too small to read on here.
Yeah, they're very tiny, but on my screen I could blow it way up.
Yeah.
It helped. We suggested that they put a locus plan together, which they have on sheet 13. There is a locus that has the aerial of the houses underneath it. It says what the districts are, and it says, like, the land uses, and it shows the streets. They did not add names of abutters, which is kind of, people like to know where their houses are, so when people are looking at them, it's nice to have those names, but they chose not to add the names at this time. They are coordinating with the fire department, they're coordinating with the DPW. Those are some of the design criteria that, of course, are critical elements. The whole understanding of the High Street does seem to be, keeps kind of coming back in my review anyway, and understanding all of the pipe connections, understanding that the DPW will let them cross over. Talked about a collapsed pipe, and has that been replaced? Is it still collapsed, or has it been
No,
fixed?
it was repaired.
Oh, good, it was repaired. That helps. That does help, because I was like, I never heard about the glass pipe. So that is, I think, would be really helpful from the flooding point of view. But from a stormwater point of view, there's still a few bids to kind of work out, but they are meeting the state standards, and they are meeting many of the local standards as well. So it will help you, I think, to know exactly which ones they are requesting a waiver from.
Yeah, and I think that that's a general statement that, you know, it came up a little bit with the traffic where the applicant had, the traffic and parking where the applicant had requested a waiver for all of the parking spots. And I think we discussed last time that we would like to really narrow that down to what do you need? And I think that as a general rule, by the time that we vote, I would like to be having an itemized list of the things that we are voting for. You know, I understand sometimes with the early stages when you're submitting it to ask for a blanket one, because then we're going to discuss all of these things in detail. But I think by the end, I want to be looking at a list of exactly what we are providing waivers for and not more than that. So, yes, thank you. And so thank you for that input, and it's definitely something that we should carry forward through all of these reviews, because I think in most of them, they are asking for blanket waivers in that sense, so.
That's what everybody does.
Yeah, and like I said, I appreciate the practicalities of it, which is that they're going to have to rewrite the list anyways after all the reviews, but like, we need a finite list of things, I think, when we come to the actual voting.
And when we do the voting, will we be voting on each element? Or
It would be a lot. It would be a lot of votes. I think it is, maybe you guys can weigh in. I think it's within our powers to do that, but I think it would probably be better not to.
So as this process goes on, and you've got a few more substantive hearings to get through, we're going to have to get a revised waiver list from the applicant. And as the chair was just saying, we usually push for more detail in the waiver list, that it isn't just a blanket exemption, say, from the stormwater bylaw, but that they identify the specific sections. And whether it's this idea of concrete pipe versus HDPE, whatever, that you know specifically what it is you're being asked, and more importantly, you know what it is you're going to be voting on. You could, generally, what the board will do towards the end, once you get this revised list, is you'll have a dedicated hearing where all we will do is go through the waivers. And some of them you will have discussed and heard about along the way, but it really gets more into focus when you get to that hearing point. And then I've seen boards do it, either vote the waivers as a slate, through a single motion. I've seen board members where they will vote on each individual one. Sometimes a board member will, something similar that you might be familiar with at town meeting, where the moderator will go through the entire budget, and unless somebody says hold on a particular item, we vote everything, and then we go back to what's been held, and then we have a little bit more detail on that. So that's entirely up to you folks as to what you feel comfortable with.
And I think that's a discussion to have later on when we actually have that list in front of us. I can say, like, probably my preferred idea is to go by slates, by basically saying, okay, these are the stormwater ones, these are the setback ones, and do them in groups like that. But we may decide differently because we may feel that there's a couple pain points that we really need to discuss, and we will do instead that other approach. So we will see.
And could I add one other
Yeah.
thing too, Mr. Chair, since there's been a lot of talk about the, stormwater pollution prevention plan, the operation and maintenance plan, all of that. As we also get closer to the end, I will start drafting a decision for you folks.
Okay.
And we include a lot of those standard conditions.
Okay.
That they are going to have to produce, copies of the signed O&M or stormwater
Excellent.
plan prior to starting any site prep work or prior to the first building permit being issued. And if we want to require that once a year they provide a reporting to us, we can require that, and we can decide, does it go to the DPW, does it go to the planning director, what makes the most sense to us?
Okay, that's great. then we will have to have a follow-up later on that topic. All right, any more items?
I'm good. Any questions?
So,
Thank you.
the sanitary sewer ties into an existing sewer, I guess, so, I was wondering about the capacity of that existing sewer.
That would be the town engineer, or the department of the sewer department.
Because drainage, like they say,
Right.
we already had drainage there, but
Right, there
was
isn't
no
any.
sanitary, so.
Yes, they will have to confirm capacity of that sewer pipe, and that should come through the DPW.
Okay.
There's a peer review going on now. So the town
there's a peer
engineers
review of
requested
the-
a
of the
peer
sanitary.
review of the capacity
Yeah,
of the
there's
sewer.
a water sewer peer review that we
Oh,
will
okay.
have separate from all of this, and
Okay.
and it's
Okay.
actually pretty substantial because we're making some modifications to our flow measuring system, and there's a whole negotiation and discussion about how that will work out, but yes.
So you'll hear.
Okay, thank you.
So, all right, any other questions before I let Ms. Bernardo go?
I could provide clarity on the trees when I do that.
All right, let's open it up to the community. Oh,
I could provide just some quick clarity on the tree question.
Sure.
Discussion. So currently, there's just over an acre of tree vegetation on the property, which equates to about 20% of the site, 1.2 acres of trees. We are removing approximately a half an acre
okay.
of trees. So to answer, I forget who.
Laura
asked that
Craig
question.
Coleman, Ms.
Okay,
Craig Coleman.
so yeah, it's the existing 20%, we're reducing it by a half an acre, and we're converting that tree area to vegetate, or, grassed area. And I just wanted to drill down on what that means from a curve number perspective. So the CN, or the curve number, the higher the CN, the more runoff
You're
is
creating,
on that
yeah.
surface. So for instance, pavement and rooftop is CN 98. For this type of soil, good woods, believe it or not, there's bad woods, but we only use good woods. Good woods has a curve number of 55. So, right in the middle between, grass.
Everything and nothing.
Exactly. Good lawn is 61. So there's slightly more runoff as compared to grass to woods, but it's a de minimis increase, I would argue, as opposed to 55 to 98. So just to provide some clarity.
And that number is linear. In other words, what you're saying is that a 50 absorbs half of the water that runs across it? Or?
Not necessarily, because it's also related to the soils beneath it. So
Sure.
good soil, good lawn in an A soil has a CN of 30-something, 38.
Right.
Whereas bad woods, meaning it's not like a lush wood, allows more runoff. It's probably in the high 60s, low 60s. So
Yeah.
relatively speaking, for a B soil, there's slightly more increase with a lawn, manicured lawn, than there is woods.
But the delta is relatively small.
Yeah, the deltas are small.
Okay.
So, and that's accounted
do-
for in our design.
I do appreciate the extra detail, but it was helpful just to know that it was automatically factored into the calculations in the HydroCAD program. That was really helpful to know. But yeah, I think the soil types make a huge difference, but it's about the speed at which the water goes across the ground, and then that determines how much of that water then gets into that soil. And I'm glad to know that that there is a distinction made between woods and grass. That was it. So thank you.
All right.
How come roofs aren't 100? Are they accounting for leaky roofs or something?
Evaporation.
Oh, yep, okay.
All right. Let's open up public comment here. And so first on our list is Kelly Sarney from 39 Prescott Street.
Should we get up?
It is up to you. I think she can come to the podium. Okay. Please, I know I said your name and your address, but please identify yourself for the record anyway.
Hi, my name is Kelly Sarney, and I reside at 39 Prescott Street. I'm the direct abutter. This kind of ties in, but a little bit doesn't. I just want to first bring up my own experience this morning as I was walking my dog. I walked down Prescott to High Street, and I had to go on the street as a sidewalk that is along their current property was not plowed. And I was facing traffic, because that's the way you're supposed to walk, is against traffic. And I happened to catch, before I got too close to the mounds of snow, because Mother Nature has been very kind to us recently, at the bottom, I happened to have seen a car coming down High Street. So I had already started to stop, because I was getting closer to the end of Prescott Street. I had my dog up on the mound of snow. I was kind of half in the mound, half out of the mound, and the car came speeding onto Prescott Street and nearly hit me this morning. And to the drivers, he couldn't see me because of the big mound of snow. And I know that there's nothing really after the storms we've had that you can really do with the snow. I'm not complaining about that part, but I am really complaining about the pedestrian safety of not having that walkway. Snowblowed, my husband and I have snowblowed from our property line down to the fire hydrant, which is at the start of our side of the woods going down for the past 12 years, because we are very concerned about public safety, and we always make sure that fire hydrant is cleared out for any potential emergencies. We know that the town has a snow removal policy. We're questioning if it gets enforced, and we're not nitpicking. It was a horrible storm. Not many people can move that type of snow. We're not nitpicking, but this has been a pattern in the past 5 years. Mother Nature's actually been kind to us in the winter, and they still have never done this. And when I was happening to walk my dog, I was going down by the Avalon spot, and I happened to notice another stockpile of snow down there right in front of the East Mill Pond, right next to a sign that says, "No stockpiling." Just putting that out on the record. We do appreciate the fact that they're willing to remove the sidewalk that goes to Prescott Street. The 16.5 feet is still way too close. At a minimum, we feel it should not extend past the current parking garage. Would even appreciate it more if it was actually moved in a little bit from the current parking garage. To us, it kind of looks like a college dorm for the picture of it, as opposed to what the houses look like. There's a lot of older homes there. And it would be nice if the design, which I know will be coming up, if it reflected, because it's going to bridge the two areas, and it would be nice if it could kind of cohesively get it married, so to speak. We are still opposed to the 5-level parking garage. It's much too dense. We have concerns because that's already up on a raised area, and I know at the very beginning, Mr. Steinberg, had said that, most of their buildings are only 4 to 5 stories tall, but they're down at the bottom of the hills. So it doesn't look like it's only looking like 2 stories. This is going to be up, and this is going to be higher than our roof line. And it's just too tall on that part. And we have a retaining wall currently that my husband and I are thinking of removing. If we do remove it, that's going to significantly affect the water drainage that's coming down, because right now that retaining wall kind of skirts it off to the back and the side, as opposed to all of a sudden it would just be a slope going directly into that area. I just wanted to point that out. We also found that in 1984, the Zoning Board of Appeals only granted the 2-level parking garage. I quote them saying, in particular, the board finds that the specific site being a mill in the process of extensive renovation is an appropriate location for such a structure, that the use of a 1-level deck will not adversely affect the neighborhood, where a 3-level deck would. If you look up Prescott, you will see people who have barns. They're only 2.5 stories high, the max. And I just feel like the parking garage shouldn't exceed that.
All right, I'm afraid we need to wrap up.
Can I give Kelly my 5 minutes?
How about one more minute?
I can wrap that up.
Okay, let's do one more minute.
I'm also concerned about the town's infrastructure because of the recent water main break on Chadwick Street as well as Barker Road. All of that stems with all the other new developments, and I'm concerned about Sutton Street by where Chickawick Brook leads out, tends to flood a lot. Is this going to impact that area? The area right now, there's a patch of grass, and then there's the woods from our property. That little patch of grass gets extremely soggy in the spring and the summer. I'm just throwing that out there for you guys to have that, because we see it every day there. But then I have a couple of questions for you. I had sent in an email because I had a family emergency last meeting. Is there a way that we can get confirmation that anything that we're being sent in, that's been received at least, so we know?
Yes, no, that's a worthwhile point, because Terry has been receiving them and passing them on to me, so I have gotten them.
Okay.
But Terry, maybe there's a way that we can have at least a confirmation of, sending a message that those messages have been received, just so people know they're not sending it into the void. That's a totally reasonable
That was just
take.
one
Yes,
concern.
no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And are those being put into the meeting minutes? How are we reading
They have not
others?
been entered into the meeting minutes, but I have sent them to the board members, and I believe we are putting them on the website. Is that correct? Okay, we can follow up with that and make sure that they are put on
Okay.
the website.
Because I heard from
didn't-
other neighbors that they sent things in, but I haven't been able to find
They
them.
were acknowledged
So-
at the meeting, though, that a letter had come in or an
Yes.
email had come in, so.
Yes, we had
The
done
meeting
that.
did address that it was received.
Yes, verbally, but I think what she would like is the content of those letters to be made available, and I think we can make a folder on the Google Drive that has those. So I'll follow up, and
Okay.
we'll figure out a way to do that, but I think that's totally reasonable.
And I think this was touched upon at the last meeting, because I watched the video. The transparency of the town's responses to the state.
Yep, I need to follow up with that fully, but
Okay.
I will be I will be requesting comment from town departments, and we will be following up. I'm going to give them some time, and I want to make sure that they, we're not rushing that with them, but yes, I will make sure that we
Okay.
get some comment from them.
And then, I'm going to ask you, because everything's supposed to go to you, but I
Absolutely.
think it's really for her. I just know that 2 board members' terms expire in June.
Yes.
One of them being you.
Yes.
How does that affect voting and process? Because you have to have this, I believe, 5 people at every
So the select
meeting?
board is allowed to renew our terms. If they chose not to, it might create a problem.
Okay, I just was hoping that we're not rushing this process to get it all done by June.
That is not my intention.
Okay.
My
All right.
intention. But there is a 6-month limit to how long we
Yes.
have this, and then anything beyond that, we would need to discuss a waiver with the applicant for that. And so that would have to be a discussion that we have. But personally, I am not worried about the term limit.
Okay.
I can have a conversation with the select board, with a select board member and see if I am wrong in that estimation, but I do not think that
I was just curious
that's
when I
a likely
happened
issue.
to see it, that I just remembered at the beginning, she had mentioned that it had to be 5
Yeah.
people, so.
There are also alternate members, though, so if,
Yep.
Yes, but
who would be available if something like that happened, if they have participated.
to some extent, although
Right.
that number gets whittled down fast,
I know.
and so we want to be careful of
Want
that.
to recuse himself, yeah.
Thank you,
All right, thank you.
and thank you for letting me go over.
All right. Michael Ronayne, 24 Prescott Street. Welcome back.
My name's Michael Ronayne.
Come on all the way up to the microphone,
My name's
because,
Michael Ronayne from
Thank you.
24 Prescott, which is right across the street from the proposed development. Over the past 2 meetings, the message from the neighborhood has been very clear. Residents are overwhelmingly opposed to this project and extremely displeased. Many, including myself, have voiced serious concerns about the building's immense size and its potential to completely disrupt the character and aesthetic of Machine Shop Village. In addition, RCG's reputation has been raised, pointing out constant negative online reviews related to the company's past projects, existing properties, and current management practices. I would like to note, however, that at the end of the very last meeting, an individual did come up and express how amazing RCG is as a landlord. Zero part of me thought the testimony felt artificial, and it definitely would not have made sense for them to ask him to do so. In fact, I've come to the realization that RCG is nothing but a humanitarian company that wants the best for communities and has zero ulterior motives at all.
I should warn you that transcripts don't record sarcasm very well.
Well, that's up for interpretation.
Okay.
Why else would they leverage 40B to build a massive housing development in a quaint historic neighborhood that would never get approved otherwise, other than to help those low-income individuals with housing? I think we all owe the company that brings in tens of millions in annual revenue a heartfelt thank you for being brave enough to help those in need. Now, with that realization, I've come up with a solution that pleases both parties, the current neighborhood residents and RCG, a solution that still maintains the 74 low-income apartments, but decreases the building size and its damaging impact on the neighborhood. I suggest that the project be 148 units compared to 296. That way, instead of being 4 to 5 floors, it could be 2 to 3. Additionally, just like RCG has in their current proposal, 74 units would remain low income, which would get North Andover above that 10% threshold. This would make 50% of the building low-income housing, which only seems fair to me. There should be just as many low-income as there are other units. I can't imagine there would be any issue with this, as they are using 40B, which promotes this low-income housing at its core. It's a win-win. RCG and North Andover still get their 74 low-income units, but the building size can be cut in half. I cannot see why there would be any objections to this. While they were the ones who currently own the garage, which they have now criticized themselves, second time's a charm, I suppose, and they'll get it this time around. I also just wanted to note that last meeting I explained to the board that the fire department is constantly going to the existing apartments located in the Machine Shop Village area. When I did so, I saw individuals shaking their head. I prompt people to look up the fire at 148 Main Street that occurred only a few weeks ago at the Sutton Pond condo complex behind the Avalon. Additionally, in these coming days, let's see how they handle all the snow in their lots. I remember a few weeks ago, there was a full day where machines and dump trucks are working to clear out all the snow from what is already currently in the village. Imagine adding more to that, at the size being proposed too. Regarding my suggested plan, RCG might say it could be hard to sell 74 non-low-income units with there being just as many low-income units. Then what do they think they're doing to our existing neighborhood? 148 units, half of them low-income, 2 to 3 floor high. I don't think residents would have any issues with that at all. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, these are all the folks that I have on my list here. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? Yes, please.
Robin Morgeson, 147 High Street. Sorry, I missed the sign up.
Oh, no worries.
So I want to touch upon a few things. The developer said the storm in 2023 was a lot, not normal. But we're not living in normal times, and I think we can all agree with that. Weather is an issue on an ongoing basis. The question isn't whether that area will flood again. The question is when. It's also interesting that the flood happened after the Avalon projects. That to me was a major flag, but I don't have the technical expertise. To see that the current proposal wants to fill what looks like every conceivable inch of that, what's left of that property, with a massive building and garage just seems, it's so frustrating. I can't stress that enough. It's so frustrating as a local resident to see this. I mean, I was sitting here earlier thinking how many hours I have spent, and I'm sure some of you could understand this, sitting in meetings, zoning board, planning board, for the same developer pushing hundreds of apartments over and over again in our neighborhood in the same plot of land. And here we are again. The impact from overdevelopment in that area is illustrated in unprecedented flood damage, traffic backups by High and Sutton, much heavier traffic through the neighborhood, more speeding, and safety concerns for residents and pedestrians. I mean, I think I said this last time, there was a fatality right by my house within the last year and a half. He had said earlier he doesn't think that the development would create 1,000 extra car trips per day in that area, which I think is hilarious. I think I said this before. I'm a homeowner. I leave my house on average 2 to 4 times a day. So my understanding is there's going to be almost 300 apartments if they're approved, and probably more than one person in those apartments. And so if you do the math, it's quite conceivable that there's easily going to be more than 1,000 trips per day in that area, which I think has implications on what the civil expert was talking about earlier. The size and implications of this proposal are sobering. The developer himself said there's a lot of things happening in that one spot. I couldn't agree more. I want to just say I applaud the zoning board's meticulous review of this, about the flooding, the traffic, the safety, et cetera, on behalf of residents. I look at every time you pull up that visual of the building, it looks like a giant hospital that should be on Route 114. It doesn't feel like something that is conceivable for High Street. This development should not happen as proposed. It just should not. We need the town to push back. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward? Okay, thank you. Thank you for the heads up, Terry. All right. Any other? Okay, then we are all set. And then, so the applicant, do you have any other comments or responses?
Not particularly unless there is any direct questions for us. I've taken note of the neighbor comments.
Anything else from the board?
No questions for me.
So, Janet, you said you got their responses to your comments and you haven't gone through them, so you will go through that and we'll get an update?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, with that then, I would like to propose that we continue to March 24th. And that is the date at which we plan to have the architecture and design review, assuming that our peer reviewer is able to provide stuff in time for you folks to then respond. And hopefully that can all work out. And so do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
To continue to March 24th.
March 24th.
At, Terry's at 7 p.m. or 7:30?
We're going to be in town hall.
Okay, at 7 p.m.? 7 p.m. at Town Hall on March 24th. Do we have a second?
Town Hall.
Yeah. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I am an aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.